Hello YouTube, and welcome to How to Carry US Battleships with Onboard G1. Today we're going to be sailing in the US Battleship Colorado, and we're going to be taking a look at the gameplay style for US battleships between Tier 3 and Tier 7 that were released in the World of Warships 3.1 patch. The US battleships in general are very tough. They have very good armor, and unlike their Japanese competitors, they have an enhanced battleship repair ability, repairing their ship for 20 seconds rather than the 10 you get on Japanese ships or the 15 that have recently been introduced on the Royal Navy's Warspite. This means that combined with the new exterior signal flag that you get for the Dreadnought achievement, which I've got equipped in this battle, the ship can repair an awful lot of its health. Like, I repair a fifth of my health during one of the engagements in this battle. US battleships are also very maneuverable, and they have very good anti-aircraft. They can turn very quickly, and they can shoot down lots and lots of aircraft, especially when they're fully upgraded. This makes them very survivable. It's really hard to kill a US battleship, especially a US battleship that's taking the opportunity to angle its armor correctly. If you angle your armor, as I do at several points during this video, you're very, very difficult to kill, even for other battleships. The disadvantages the US ships have are their range is relatively short, although that can be rectified somewhat by fitting the range enhancing modification in slot 2 of your modification window. And they also suffer a little bit from speed. They only go 21 knots, which means that they're very inflexible compared to the 30 or 25 or 28 knots that Japanese battleships can attain. Even the Nagato, that can only go 2 or 3 or 4 knots faster than the Colorado, I find is much more flexible in carrying games. So when you're playing this ship, you have to think an awful lot about where you're going to go and where you're going to set up. In the initial stages of the game, you have to develop a game plan, and then you have to be willing to modify that game plan very early on in order to win. This means that you have to think very far ahead in the game. Now here what I'm doing is I'm going towards A and B, the two capture points in this domination game. Again, I apologize for the replay. The replay appears to be bugged and showing the standard battle interface rather than the domination interface, but I still remember what the points totals were, so I'll let you know what those were as we go through. My decision here is to go to A and B, and as I go to A and B, I'm going to try and help our team capture those points. I'm going to try and crush their cruisers that come through, because this ship's very good at bullying cruisers. And I'm going to try and close with the enemy and do as much damage as I physically can. Now here I spot a Furitaka, and you can see one of the problems that the ship has right away. The dispersion, even at short range, is just terrible. It's really bad. And also you have quite high velocity guns, meaning you overpenetrate an awful lot. But my job here is to kill the Furitaka. I'm not really paying attention to the battleships at the back there. In fact, I'm making a little bit of a mistake here. I'm not angling my armor very well. I realise this now, and I start angling my armor out away from the battleships just in case they fire at me again. Again, my job here is to try and kill this ship because he's threatening our destroyer on the cap. Now you're going to see here one of the changes that was made to armor piercing in version 3.1. It's no longer possible to just smash through cruisers. Here I bounce 4 shots, 16-inch caliber, off the side of a Furitaka because he's really well angled. He's angled his ship really nicely there. I now have a 30-second cooldown, and I'm swearing and cursing. Another change to AP which happened, which suggests I probably should have used high explosive here, but old habits die hard. One of the changes to HE, AVP I mean, is that the AP shells no longer have the diving capability that they used to have. It means that when you pull the trigger on the enemy and the shells land just a little bit too close, what used to happen is that the shells would pass underneath the water, dive below the armoured belt and hit it. The range at which armor-piercing shells can do that has been reduced, which is a big nerf to AP shells, because previously you could land shots 20 yards short of a battleship that dive underneath and hit the citadel. That's what I used to do, and I trained myself to do. You can't do that anymore, and you can see here I'm getting a bit salty with this Furitaka's armor. We're starting to see a bit of a problem here, because the Furitaka's blown through that cap. That cap's now being taken, and has been taken by the enemy, and he's closing in on our aircraft carrier, so he really needs to die. He's also had a friend arrive, a Japanese destroyer. He's launched torpedoes at me almost inevitably, so I start turning away from him. I actually fire a round at both the Furitaka and the destroyer because I need to turn away relatively quickly, and I can't turn in to hit the Furitaka or I'll run straight into the torpedoes. For some reason here I think he maybe hasn't launched torps at me, and I turn back in and then realise he has launched torps at me. This was a big mistake. I should have assumed that he'd continue to send me, launch torps for me, or launch my scout plane in order to detect the torpedoes, but I was running too many things through my head at once. I hit my repair so that I don't lose too much from flooding, and so that my steering comes back in action. And you can see here one of the really kind of awesome things about the US BBs. I'm going to hit my repair ability just now, and you'll see that I repair like a huge amount of my health. Yeah, here we go. I repair like 20% of my health from that. 23-24 seconds of repair time. And that's because A, I have a US battleship, which has a bonus to this inherently, and I've also got the plus 20% increase to your battleship's heal amount that you get from getting the Dreadnought achievement, which I got in this ship actually. I face charged into a Fuso and came out alive. So here, my job is going to be to try and kill these two destroyers. I shift focus away from the Furtaka because we've got another cruiser who's interested in trying to kill him. The cruiser has actually just sunk him and he's about to sink the other destroyer. You have to learn when to change targets, and here I'm still firing AP at these guys. Now, I still find AP very effective against destroyers, even with the changes, because destroyers do have a fair amount of machinery in the center mass, which means that if you can hit the center mass, you'll still do quite a lot of damage. Now, I'm in a fairly problematic position here. I've done a reasonably good job at fending off this assault. I apologise to our carrier because I couldn't quite manage to save him in time. But the 3 or 4 ships that were charging in behind our line are now all dead. This means that this side of the map is completely secure. The problem we've got now, though, is that we're losing the sea capture point. We have an advantage in ships at the moment and an advantage in points, but only just. We've killed more of their battleships than they have of ours, which means that we're up about 100 points at this stage of the game. But if they capture that point out, then they're going to have an advantage in capture points, and they're going to slowly start eating into that lead. So I ask our Furtaka to go and capture B, but either he doesn't speak English or he's not paying attention, because he decides to do the worst thing he could do in this situation, and go round the west side of the island that he's near, and charge, I don't know where he goes here. That's a really big mistake, because what needs to happen is we need to capture this point back in order to retain our advantage. If we fail to kill any ships in the next, 10 minutes, and they don't kill any ships in the next 10 minutes either, we win. It's that simple, because we have a cap point advantage, and we would have 2 points, and they would have 2, but that means that we need to take back B. If we don't take back B, we lose, because they're going to eat into our point advantage and then surpass it. They win if status quo is maintained here. So I start heading towards B, and this is something I don't particularly like about World of Warships. Well, it's not about World of Warships, it's about the way Wargaming has built the classes. They've put them into fairly strict roles, and they've said you must do this in a battleship, and you must do this in a cruiser, and they've released videos to that effect. That means people have this very inflexible idea of how to fight in battleships, and how to fight in cruisers, and how to fight in destroyers. People never go into cap points in their battleships because they say, well, I'm just going to get torped. So they never go into open sea in their cruiser because they say, I'm just going to get blown up by a battleship. And they don't consider the other advantages that these ships have. They don't pay attention to the map. Like in this case, our Nagato, much to his credit, has worked out what I've worked out, which is that the enemy are all in the east. We've got a free run on point B, we're just going to go in and take it. But people don't always work that out. They sit there and they say, oh, it's a battleship, its job is to snipe, or its job is to, hang around the edge of the map and fight other battleships. No, it's not. The job of a battleship is to deal damage where it's needed, and to project power where it's needed. In this case, the way we project power is by capturing the points, and I'm closest to the points, so I have to do that. Don't think that you must be pigeonholed into roles. If you can win the game, and even it's going to be risky, even if you know there's a destroyer in the area, if you're going to lose the game, by not capturing the point, go and capture the point. I decided at this point that I probably don't want to run into B-cap. The Nagato has that covered, and since the points just flipped in the enemy's favour, even if we take that point back and nothing else happens, we lose. Status quo favours the other team. They have a destroyer left, they have 2 cruisers left and an aircraft carrier left. They could camp the corner of the map and stay away from our fairly slow ships, since we only have 1 fast ship and he seems to have no interest in doing anything sensible. They could just camp that corner and that would allow them to win. So instead I decide what I need to do is I need to go and get some kills to push the points back into our favour and allow status quo to favour us and win. Now I start to move to engage the Miyoko, because killing him will gain us a slight points advantage and probably start drawing us level. It will reduce their points and increase ours. He's hitting me from quite a long range, which means that his shells are going to be hitting my superstructure and going through my deck armor, giving him some semi-penetrations, and with his 10 guns, that means he's going to be chipping away at my health reasonably well. So I decide I'm going to close in. I use my repair ability just to bring my health up a little bit, and I'm going to close in, and I'm going to try and get into an immunity zone range. I also angle my armor towards him a little bit, because effectively your ship becomes a bit like an IS-3's pike nose. You've got lots of armor angles which are very difficult to punch through, because at that range you've got an angle from the deck, you've got an angle from the sides, and it's like a triangle. So you've always got a very sharp slope towards the enemy shells. He, on the other hand, is starting to heal away from me, which means that I can hit the weak point underneath his rear turret where his magazine is. Because he's healing, my shells don't have to go under the waterline to hit that weak point. They can just hit the bare metal where it's being lifted out of the water by his maneuver. So I managed to do that twice to him. I hit him once under the rear turret and then again, and that leaves him really hurting. So looking at how the battle's playing out here, I decided that I want to kill the Miyoko. The Miyoko is the biggest threat to me personally at the moment, and the entire enemy fleet is more or less within my range right now. There's a cruiser coming around the east and I know he's there. I want to kill him first. That means that I can severely reduce their points or even kill most of them to end up with a win, basically. So you can see here that the guys launched torpedoes at me. I dodged them reasonably well. He's going to hit me a few times here. He's going to hit me in softly armoured parts of my ship. There's not much you can do about that as a battleship. If he hits your superstructure or if he hits your bow at a flat angle, he's going to go through. But it doesn't do very much damage, so you don't have to worry too much compared to like the 4 or 5, you know, up to 13k I'm doing per shot every time I hit him. It's not too bad. Now here I take the opportunity to redirect my secondary fire onto the Gramiashi that's in front of me once I've fired at this Miyoko. I can see him there, my secondary guns have opened up on him. I'm actually doing a fair bit of damage to him. And I give them the additional bonus from right-clicking on him. And then, well, it turns out that favours me quite well, because one of my 152mm guns in a casemate mount hits his magazine and instantly destroys him. So yeah, always take the opportunity to control right-click on targets for your secondary batteries, because it really does make them better. So here he's launched torpedoes at me. I don't know at the time he's launched torpedoes at me. I probably should have worked it out from the fact that he turned in such a radical way that almost always means Japanese cruisers launching on you. However, I think, oh, oops. And here are the torpedoes. I don't manage to turn in time. I'm going to try and angle my ship as much as possible and soak it on my belt armor to try and reduce the damage, but it goes in just ahead of my belt and does 10k damage. Again though, this thing's really tough and almost impossible to kill, so I blow my repair kit, hit my battleship heal ability, and I'm back up to 17, 18k of health. And there's that immunity zone taking effect. I just soaked every single shot from that Cleveland. And in return, this is an important thing to note. Where I hit him there, at the waterline below the smokestacks, is a very small citadel on the Cleveland, but that's where you need to be aiming. Because if you hit there, you're going to do an enormous amount of damage. Especially with a 16-inch shell. Clevelands are difficult to kill, but their citadels are located like underneath their front turrets at the waterline and underneath their smokestacks at the waterline. Like, it's exactly underneath the smokestacks though, so if you hit anywhere in the middle or around that, you won't damage them. But that's the game more or less over. We've pretty much won this, and I've taken a huge beating from the cruisers, but I've done my job and I've fended off the main threats to our cap zones and to our carriers. So what are the take-home lessons here in terms of how you play the American battleships of this tier? Well, because they're slow, you have to be in a position where you can project power. If I had done what many battleship captains do and charge out into the west in order to fight battleships that may or may not be there, then I probably would have lost the game, actually. I wouldn't have been able to carry it. Instead, what I do is I make sure that I hold my ship in a sort of rough circle around the 2 caps that I've decided I want to protect, and I can project power into the 3rd cap with relatively minimal relocation. Because of your range and because of your speed, you have to be a bit conservative with the American battleships. The way I read that battle, I was pretty sure the enemy was gonna, after they'd pushed through the middle, they were probably gonna keep pushing through the middle and try and push their advantage with those 3 caps that they'd taken control of while isolating our battleships in the west. So I had to be kind of conservative in the way I played. I had to stay close to the spawn, I had to stay close to the various points. And that's how you need to play these ships. You need to play the middle. You need to be in the best position to flex into caps, and you need to be in a good position to take on enemies that can potentially win the game for the other team, and you don't do that by heading out to the edges of the map. You can get away with that in the Japanese ships because of their speed. You can't get away with that in the American ships. Overall, the American ships are alright. I quite like them in direct combat. As you saw there, they're very tough, they're very hard to kill, they've got really good armor, but their speed really cripples them. It means that you're very inflexible, and you have to play a very conservative game plan, which I don't really like. It doesn't suit my playstyle. However, I've had some success in them, so clearly it's not all that bad. I hope you guys have learned something from this video, and I hope that you have some success in the US battleships. So good luck on the high seas, enjoy your American ships, and I'll see you next time.